The 6K is the main camera for the FP1 classes. It comes with a pouch in the side. The pouch has a memory cards, your card reader. It comes with 2 memory cards and all the cords required for the card reader. I don't have to go through that. In the back pocket, there's a cord to hardwire the camera to power it. If all of your batteries die on set and you emergency need to power the camera, that's always there in the back of the bag. Otherwise, the meat and potatoes of the package, 3 batteries, the camera itself. Depending on which package you're checking out for what class, you'll get a lens or you won't get a lens, and 2 battery chargers. This is what comes with the camera. So starting at the front of the camera, the lens goes here. On the side of the camera is all of the imports or ports to plug in, like headphones, a microphone, HDMI if you're gonna use an external monitor, and to power it or plug in an external hard drive. These ports are kind of rarely used outside of a monitor situation for the HDMI port. The screen for the camera obviously tilts and swivels as needed. We'll get over these buttons, but there's buttons everywhere. First thing we need to do is put a lens on the camera. So you have to press this button over here and hold it, and then spin the body cap off, and here's the guts of the camera. Now, what's very important is this is the camera sensor. It is the most fragile and probably most important part of the camera. Don't kill it. Please don't kill the camera sensor. You can easily get thumbprints on it or dirt in there. Don't. You should never, this should always be covered almost as much as possible. It's very easy to repair a lot of pieces of this camera, but that is impossible to repair. So just make sure that's your main priority when it comes to protecting this camera. Don't just leave it like I have it now. Don't do that. Kind of swiftly change the lenses. So on your camera lens, there's always a dot on the camera lens. It's either going to be red or white depending on the lens. You're going to line that dot up to this red dot on the camera, and then twist the lens in place until it clicks. Now you have a lens. Now we need to power the camera. The battery bay for the camera is at the bottom. One of our batteries goes in like so. The metal tips need to go down into the camera. The last thing we need to do is put in memory cards for the camera so that we can record stuff. It's in this hidden port on the side. You have to like kind of press down on this, but then pull it out and it'll release with a spring. Grab one of the memory cards from our bag and plop one of these in here. This is always a little bit difficult to tell how to put it in, but these metal, this part needs to go into the camera. This part sticks out of the camera. It's like a 50-50. There's a ridge, and the ridge goes towards the front of the camera is how I remember how to put the CF card in. But if you try to push it in and it won't go, you're breaking it. Don't break it, please. When it goes, it'll snap into place. To pull the card out, you push back in and it'll pop out of place and you just pull it out. Fairly easy mechanism. Okay, so to turn the camera on, there's an on and off switch up here in this area. Just turn the camera on, and then we'll take off our lens cap so we can see things. And we'll just start from the top. The number one thing we need to know is how to start recording. To start recording, you can press this button, this record button here, or you can press this record button up here, or you can press this record button here. Why are there 3? No one knows. It's a hidden secret from Blackmagic. Okay, so there's a lot of ways to configure things on this camera. There are options to use the touch screen that are around on the screen, but there's also a menu button. The menu button is this third button here with 3 horizontal lines. You can click it in and out to get to the menu. Let's start on the screen. First thing you can do is if you just swipe in the middle, all your settings can go away so that you can have like a undistracted viewpoint of the camera. Let's start in the top left. In the top left, if you click this little square, the rectangle, you have your display settings. There's so much that happens in here. This first setting is zebra. Zebra is if you're ever overexposed, if your image is ever too bright, it'll make these zebra stripes for you. You can turn that off and on. Our second setting here is focus peaking. So if you turn that on, everything in focus will get outlined by a color. Usually that color is green or red, but you can change the sensitivity of this setting. Like if you want it only to show up a little bit, you can be at 24%. If you want it to like really be obvious when you're in focus, you can crank it up. This is really vital to help you stay in focus, but if it is ever too distracting, you want it to go away, you just turn it off. Our third setting here is to set different aspect ratios. You can turn it on and you can change the shape of the screen. It puts like imaginary bars. You'll actually record the full screen still, but this is a way for you to, if you plan on exporting your movie in a different aspect ratio, will just let you visualize it with a different ratio. The next one is a grid, so you can put the rule of thirds on the display of the screen. You can just put the horizon line, crosshairs. There's all kinds of options of just how to help you frame the camera. Our fifth option here is also a guiding tool. It just puts a big rectangle on the screen to help you if you plan on cropping your image or anything. There's a few useful uses, but I rarely use this one. So our sixth option over here is false color. This is our exposure tool. I'm not going to explain false color to you in this video, but this is how you enable it on this camera. Our last one is just the LCD brightness, which is terrifying because you might, if this is turned down, you might think that your shot is too dark, and vice versa. As a rule of thumb, I like to keep it at 75, but you should never expose based off this monitor or based off any monitor really. But that's how you change the brightness of the screen. If you look at the top of the camera, there are many buttons, but some of the other buttons, there's a function 1, 2, and 3 here. These buttons enable some of the things that we just went through. If you hit function 1, that's false color. If you hit function 2, that'll bring up focus peaking. If you hit function 3, it'll turn on and off your grid. That's usually the functions that are programmed up here, but these can be customized through the menu setting, and a lot of students will go and customize and put in their own settings. We try to reset it and make sure that these are the 3 options here. And just understand that if they are changed to something different than what we have, that's just because the previous user of the camera changed them. Once again, you can get to everything just by doing this, but the function buttons are just a faster, quick, and dirty way to get in and out of some of those settings. Now, going along the top, the rest of our settings is the frames per second. You can change the frame rate of your camera from 23.98, 24, all the way up to 50 on this camera. For our movies, we're usually shooting 24 frames a second, so either of the first 2 options will work. The next option up here is shutter speed or shutter angle. You should learn about that in FP1 and its uses, but that's how you change the shutter speed and the shutter angle. Your aperture is here. To change the aperture of the lens, you can click here and drag this line. But also there's like a wheel right here, and as you toggle this wheel, that will also change the aperture of the lens. There's a faster way to do it rather than tapping and dragging. You just spin that wheel. ISO is the same thing. You tap and change the ISO. They have quick settings for 200, 400, and then all these, but there's much more flexibility in between those numbers. The next button is white balance. There are standardized options at the top for like a cloudy day or fluorescent lights or whatever, but you can also just dial this into your own desires. You can also change the tint between magenta and green. That's white balance settings. Other way to get to your menu up here, rather than this button, is this button up here if you are in love with the touchscreen. Now in filmmaking, we rarely record audio through the camera, but a lot of your audio settings can be found if you just tap the audio settings here. You can change the decibels and the headphone volume and the speaker volume. All right, a couple other buttons on the back here. You can change your frame rate here, but this first button right here is HFR for high frame rate. It'll toggle into a higher frame rate, and you can set that in the settings. If you ever want to zoom in on something, there's a zoom button just to help you focus even more. And you just press it again to toggle out of it. Once again, this is your menu, and this bottom button is your playback. So whatever you've recorded, if you want to watch it, you just press the start button, and then all of the options are fairly standardized at the bottom of that menu. To get back into record mode, you can't actually press it again. You just press the record button, and it'll take you back to the camera. Once again, there are 3, 1, 2, 3 record buttons on here. So just press any record button and it'll take you back to the camera options. These buttons up here are for an ND filter. These cameras have an internal ND filter. It's neutral density, so they're like sunglasses. They're like little filters that plop into place and cut light just like sunglasses. There's 3 settings, and you just toggle through all of them. This is something you need to be aware of when you first start the camera, because someone could have the highest level of sunglasses on, the highest level of ND on their camera, and then leave it there. And so you think that the camera is incredibly dark when you turn it on, but really it's just they have a lot of ND over the sensor. So make sure you check that and clear that out when you turn your camera on. On top of the camera here, there are also a couple extra shortcuts. Once again, this is the biggest record button, the one most commonly used. There's also an ISO button. You can click that and change your ISO. You can use the wheel on the front of the camera. Once you hit ISO, you can use this wheel and it'll change the ISO. This button is shutter speed. Once again, you can change the shutter speed and use the toggle wheel. And then also white balance. You hit the white balance button and you toggle through it. The last thing on the touchscreen menu that we need to look at is formatting your memory card. Remember, formatting your memory card is deleting everything. You should always format your card as the first thing you do when you turn the camera on. So you can click down here. We have our memory card in. We should say format card. It should be exFAT. This is the format you should always use, exFAT. This means it can be used by both Windows computers and Mac computers. You can rename it if you want to, but just format again, and then you press and hold it. It makes certain that you are sure that you want to delete the card, and then it'll format the card for this camera. This is important because maybe the memory card came from being used on a different camera, and the way that it's formatted isn't compatible with the way that this camera will write footage to the card. So you have to format it. It also clears everything off the card. Let's go into the menu now. Once again, you can click this to get into the menu, or you can click this button to get into the menu. Our first option to look at is the record settings. If you want the smallest files possible for when you're in the lab and you want to edit something really quick and you want small files that are easy to export and export faster, what you'll do is use ProRes Proxy HD. So that'll just be like good footage, but really small footage in an HD format. But when you're out shooting your own projects, you want to shoot Blackmagic RAW, 8:1, and 6K. I know 6K may be a little bit intimidating, but we have to shoot 6K on this camera because your image will crop in if you don't shoot 6K. So if you see if you change it to 4K, this item comes up that says sensor windowed. That means the sensor is cropping in the image. So let's get out of the menu and look at something. So we can see both of these rivets on the back of this chair here. If we go into 4K and it comes up with window censored, we now can't see the rivets. It crops in your image about 30%. So you're literally not getting all the info you can get. So 6K is the only setting that isn't sensor windowed. So if you want to use the entire camera sensor, you have to shoot 6K. Just be aware that anytime that you see sensor windowed, it is cropping your image. For your project, when you're making your movie, you should always shoot 6K Blackmagic, but in the lab, when you're doing something really quick and dirty, ProRes Proxy HD. In Blackmagic RAW, these settings change how big the files are. So 12:1 is a smaller file, 8:1 is a little bigger, 5:1 a little bigger, 3:1 really big. I recommend 8:1. If you want to know how much room you have on your memory card, go back down here and it'll tell you. So I can shoot 21 and a half minutes of 6K footage at 8:1. But if I do 3:1, it's only 8 minutes and 2 seconds. So these settings kind of matter and will limit how much or how little you can shoot. 8:1 or 12:1 is what I recommend. 12:1, we can get 30 minutes out of one card. Okay, so under the record tab, there's actually 2 more pages. Your dynamic range setting. Your dynamic range setting should be extended video. This setting will kind of slightly alter the way colors appear in your raw footage. You can also change the frame rate here. You can also change your off-speed frame rate if you ever want to shoot in a different custom frame rate up to 50 frames per second. You would do this for slow motion or a few other reasons, but for the most part, that's going to stay off. Your preferred media for recording, we're going to almost always be on CFast. That's the memory card that we pack with the camera. But if for whatever reason you want to plug in an SD card or a USB, like a full hard drive, you can plug in through a USB slot in the side of the camera. You can change which is preferred media. We just leave that on CFast. The last page has a few settings, but I would just never touch this. Sometimes students will put on detail sharpening. Don't do that. That's really gross. If you want to sharpen your image, you can always do that later while you're editing. The next tab is the monitor tab. This will change the settings that are happening on your monitor, on your display. A lot of these we already went over. This is a way to do it in the within the menu system. But these settings are the same as these settings. So if we go back into the menu setting, clean feed means turn everything off. You'll find everything else that we've already talked about, like zebra, focus assist, frame guide, all of that's here. But sometimes you want to manipulate those things just for this monitor, or if you have the camera going to out of your HDMI port into a monitor, you can adjust the settings for that as well. We don't have a viewfinder. That's something you can buy as an attachment on this camera. We don't have that. There's a few more pages within this tab of monitor, but a lot of these are just fine-tuning the things we've already talked about. Like you can change your zebra level, you can change your frame guides here, you can change your LCD brightness. This is things that we've already seen and talked about. Everything on this monitor page is actually found in a easier to find place that we've gone over. Your audio. Now this is a big important one. As a standard, your camera audio should always be on camera left and camera right, and you can see the audio levels jumping. There's an in-camera microphone that's picking it up. It's very important that you have on-camera audio so that you can sync it to your off-camera audio recording device. If you don't have any audio coming into the camera, then you have to manually sync to your slate clap. And that can be very tedious. So sometimes I will go in here and someone has changed this to XLR because you can plug in XLRs into here with an adapter, but if that is the setting of the camera, you aren't getting camera audio anymore unless you're plugged into the side of the camera. This needs to stay on camera right and camera left, so you'll have source audio. There's a second page here if you do want to monitor the audio that is coming through the camera. You can change your headphone volume and speaker volume. But normally this is standardized and you should just keep this at 0 dB and as the standard settings for camera left and right. In the setup tab, you can do a few things. You can change your shutter speed setting from shutter angle to shutter speed. You don't really need to do that. You can change what your function buttons do. If you want to change what the 3 buttons on top do, feel free to change that. We try to go in and standardize it, but you can change those settings accordingly. There's quite a few pages in the setup tab, but these are things that you really shouldn't touch and things that don't super matter, like auto dimming the display, and the LED brightness, things like that, resetting to factory settings. There's not a lot that you should be doing in the setup menu. Presets for most of these cameras, we don't have many presets right now, but if you have your own settings that you want to quickly revert the camera back to, you could create your own presets of the settings baked into the camera. You're not going to use that tab a lot. The LUT tab is for LUTs of the camera. This is a way to kind of look into the color of your footage. This isn't, if you don't know what LUTs are yet, I would just completely ignore this tab. Once you get further into FP1 and FP2 and then into cinematography, you'll know what LUTs are and how to use them. But for now, I would ignore this tab completely. And that's a walkthrough of all the buttons and all the settings that you need to know about this camera. It's not a difficult camera. Basically, every setting that you need to get to can be done through the main screen. It's just something that you should set your camera up the night before the shoot or even days before the shoot so that you're ready to go instead of fiddling with all these options while you're on set and wasting time. Hopefully this covers all your questions. Good luck on your shoot.